Welcome to Betrayal Recovery Radio, the official podcast of APSATS, the Association of Partners of Sex Addict Trauma Specialists, hosted by Dr. Jake Porter. APSATS is a nonprofit organization providing professional training and compassionate support to partners affected by problematic sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. In each episode, Dr. Jake guides a conversation of enlightening insights and practical tools to empower those affected by sex addiction and betrayal trauma to use their voices and live their values. The mission of Betrayal Recovery Radio is to offer hope to those in need of healing and growth to those moving through grief. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jake Porter.
Welcome back to Betrayal Recovery Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Jake Porter, and I'm really excited to share with you this episode. It's probably no less than once a week that I get an email or a message through our website from a man who has been betrayed asking, can you please point me to more resources for male betrayed partners? And while there have been some good things out there, it's definitely one of those areas where much more is needed. Well, today I get to have a conversation with Adam Nisenson. He is known as the Betrayal Shrink, and he combines his extensive clinical skills with a deeply empathic heart in his role as a betrayal trauma coach. Licensed as a marriage and family therapist and certified sex addiction therapist, Adam is dedicated to guiding men through the complex emotions and challenges of betrayal trauma. His methodology is deeply influenced by his intimate grasp of the trials faced by men confronting a partner's infidelity. Leveraging his extensive clinical background and personal insights of being a betrayed partner himself, Adam creates a supportive and understanding environment where clients are led through their journey of healing with compassion and wisdom. Holding a degree from Pacifica Graduate Institute with a focus on marriage and family therapy, professional clinical counseling, and depth psychology, Adam has committed his career to addressing critical issues such as betrayal, infidelity, sex addiction, and the myriad life challenges that accompany them. With Adam, the journey is not just about recovery, it's about embarking on a path of profound professional growth and rediscovery. My conversation with Adam was insightful and fun, and he's clearly both knowledgeable and heartfelt in his work. And so I'm so grateful that I get to put out there another resource for men who have been betrayed. I do want to say this, though, to our female listeners. There's a lot of overlap, and there are insights from this episode that will apply to you as well, as betrayal rocks, everyone in some ways that are similar, regardless of gender. Now, before we get into this conversation with Adam, I do have a few updates from APSATS for you. Of course, this is the official podcast of APSATS, the Association of Partners of Sex Addict Trauma Specialists. And the cornerstone sort of foundational training that APSATS offers is the multidimensional partner trauma model training. And I have two exciting opportunities for any of you who have never taken that training to join in. It is absolutely essential if you're going to work with this population of those who've been betrayed. Via Zoom, the training will be held January 6th through the 9th, this upcoming year, 2025. So about a month from, less than a month from when this episode is going to be released. But then also in Singapore, the multidimensional partner trauma model is being taken to Singapore March 2nd through 5th. You can learn more about both of these opportunities at apsats.org. A few other things coming up. On January 17th, if you have questions about being certified with APSATS, there will be a Q&A held live online on January 17th, apsats.org, and you can click on events to find out more there. But also, big announcement, our next annual meeting, February 5th through the 7th, also via Zoom, so you can join from wherever you are, the 2025 annual conference of APSATS. The theme is Healing Together, Empowering Partners and the Professionals Who Guide Them. And you can get an early bird discount to attend that conference if you register through the end of this year, December 31st. A couple of other freebies we have for you as listeners to Betrayal Recovery Radio, APSATS is offering a free download from Dr. Crystal Hollenbeck called Expectations. What should the betrayed expect from the betrayer in the therapeutic process? You can download that freebie at apsats.org/podcast. And of course, if you haven't yet downloaded my book, Breaking Barriers, Building Bridges on the Couple-Centered Recovery Model, you can do that at my website, drjakeporter.com/breaking barriers. Okay, that's enough announcements. I really am excited to offer to you all my conversation with Adam Nisenson. Adam, welcome to Betrayal Recovery Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks
this is
for
great.
coming on. Yes, and I'm super excited to get connected with you through our friend Carol Sheets connected us, and so glad she did, because what we're talking about today, we just need so much more material and content out there on this subject of betrayed male partners. So I want to just ask you, you shared in your book that you sent me a copy of, that really you're writing from both professional and personal experiences. And I wondered if you might want to talk a little bit about how you got here.
Well, I know we don't have time for the full story, but like 13 years ago, my now ex-wife had an affair, and it, like most anyone that goes through that, it flipped my world upside down. And it was not only probably one of the darkest, deepest, loneliest times in my life. I realized on that journey that there was nowhere for me to really turn. Not only just as a man going through betrayal, but resource-wise and stuff like that. And then I became a therapist, and it just organically, which is another long story, started to happen to where I fell into this niche. That's a huge need, if you will. So that would be the short story. Yeah.
And why do you think it is that there is such a need around this? That men, when men are the betrayed partner, we have a harder time getting them to come into our practice. They seem to be an underserved, underreported, segment of our society. What do you think's going on there?
Well, I think you just hit the first part. I think just men in general looking for self-help and therapy, right? There's that stigma maybe of being weak, or I'll figure this out on my own, right? And you see that in your practice. I see that in mine. With betrayal, I think it's amplified. It's times 10, because it really gets to the man's ego. It gets to that stigma of shame, of maybe not being enough, right? Most men, I don't know about you, but like I grew up with the idea of like I have to buck up, tough it out, right? Have to do it on my own. Can't ask for help, or like the old joke, guys don't ask for directions.
Right.
This is probably the directions that all men need help with. So I think that's the underlying current of why this is it's a taboo topic for men. Like you don't ever really hear of men talking about being cheated on. And I don't want to stereotype. And I've heard plenty of women talk about it in society. And I mean, if you think of all the magazines and all the books out there, all the stuff I see on Reddit, which if we want to talk about Reddit later, we can, because I think Reddit's a pretty toxic place to navigate your partner betrayal. But yeah, that's kind of what I see with men when it comes to this kind of work.
Right.
Yeah. Those societal expectations, if you will.
Totally. Yeah. And, I get emails and messages from men who've been betrayed asking me for resources. But another email I frequently get from them is, and I really try to be mindful of this, but so often when I'm having these conversations, we sort of use this generic he, she, with the he representing the one who betrayed and she representing the one who was betrayed. And I know I try to be mindful of it, because I know, I can imagine, won't say I know, but I can imagine if I'm wanting this resource, how that could just feel like more alienating.
Yeah. And I just want to say, maybe as a guy, I'll just own it. It kind of ticks me off when I read all these books and it's the guy is always the cheater.
Right.
And I know the statistics are really kind of wishy-washy. I can't, maybe, is it like 30% of women get cheated on in a marriage, I think. And I think for men, they say like 18%, but it's underreported, right? So I got to think it's almost 30% for both sexes. But yeah, there's no resources out there. That was the other catalyst, right, for me to write this book is not only did I live it and experience it, but as a therapist, I help people navigate it all the time. And I really learned that men didn't have anything that spoke in their tone, in their voice. There's nothing out there written by a man who actually truly knows that pain. And so I'm hoping I can start to shift that paradigm and start to let men know that this is part of life. This is part of relationships. I often tell my clients, when in a relationship, your heart gets cracked open 2 times. It gets cracked open when you fall in love, and it gets cracked open when the relationship or you get hurt, right? And that's part of the human experience. So yeah, no resources out there for sure.
Yeah, it's tough. That's one of the reasons I was so excited to see what your work is all about. And so to kind of get a little deeper into your work, you've actually put together a model, right, called masculine betrayal trauma, MBT.
Yeah, MBT recovery.
So can you tell us a little bit about MBT recovery, masculine betrayal trauma recovery, what sets it apart, some of its unique features?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily earth-shattering, not to minimize what I created, but one of the things I've learned and I've watched men go through that I work with and my own experiences, I thought it'd be good. Look, men, we like instructions. We like to see how things work. And I felt like I can get men to a place through 7 stages, my MBT recovery model, right? And in all betrayal trauma, right? I think we always start with shock, right? It's always shock, and it's always this disbelief and the questioning and the wondering. What I notice happens with men is that shock gets intertwined with their ego or their ego injury, right? And often what men, right, we're taught when something breaks, what do?
Fix it.
Fix it. Yeah. Right. And so the ego injury kicks in that initial stage, and a man just wants to fix it. And I'll, like in my book, one of the things I did was at the end of each chapter, I wrote my experience. So I remember that my fixing was I remember my ex-wife, the first thing I said after she disclosed or let me know what was happening, I said to her, I was like, I wonder what my part is. That was like one of the first things I said to her. And looking back that just feels crazy to me. I was going to fix it. I was going to fix me, but I wasn't going to fix what the real problem was. So that's the first stage. And then do you want me to talk every stage here? Or
I actually do. No, I really do. I mean, we can pause in between them, but so let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about ego injury.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that?
I mean, I think men, I think every sex does this, right? We have a perception of who and what we are. I think for men, the ego also incorporates a lot of walls because we don't really always let men in, right? Men struggle with vulnerability.
Right.
And so when I'm into the denial and my ego's injured, I'm putting up walls. I'm not letting people really know what's going on with me. Like we said, I'm going to fix it, right? And so that's usually that ego injury, that wound. I like to call it kind of the ego trap. It traps us into this false belief that by doing this, I'm going to fix everything and everything's going to be okay and it's going to turn out okay. And that's just not true, guys. This work, if you want to do this work, this is going to be probably some of the hardest work you'll ever do. And it'll also be probably the most rewarding work you ever do. And it'll change who you are as a man for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So phase 2.
After my shock, right? Then I'm questioning everything and I'm wondering, it's my self-worth and who am I? And how did this happen to me, and why am I not enough? And so it really gets into that self-worth, that self-esteem, that self-love kind of wound, which actually, to me, interestingly, in addiction work and in betrayal work, like, right, self-love, self-worth, self-esteem, or those are kind of the core concepts. When you find that, you can start to heal. You can start to
Yeah.
love yourself. So stage 2 is really questioning everything you know about yourself and doubting yourself in that process throughout that stage.
You know, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about a lot of the clients I've worked with where, you know, and I do talk about this here on the show. Most of the couples I see, it is the woman who's been betrayed, and they
Yeah.
do have their own sort of questions around self-worth. But it's listening to you, I can hear some subtle nuances between the way I often hear things articulated from women
Totally.
versus what you're saying here. And yet there's kind of this odd beauty, I think, in the fact that regardless of gender, it's both like, am I enough? Was I enough? You know, getting back to those questions of worth. What are some of the specifically male self-worth questions you think?
Yeah, that, and I'll answer that. I'll say too, that kind of drops down to like the 4th stage, like the
Okay.
competitiveness and the jealousy, right? I think for men, it's the ego and that self-worth, all that stuff will combine. And, you know, the things I hear from men is that it's instantly um, like, am I just not enough as a man? I
As a
get that
man.
a lot. Or what did I not do enough? Or what does he have that I don't have, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the guys I work with, what I notice in the beginning of this process, it's more around exterior. Like, am I not fit enough? Did I not make enough money? I don't have big enough muscles, right? Or I don't have any hair, and this guy has a full set of hair, right?
Mm.
Sorry, no offense there.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm practicing all my grounding tools right
No,
now.
you're good. You're good.
I'm
It's a,
kidding. I'm kidding.
right. So I think what
Yeah.
happens for the guy is he starts to find all his faults that
Mm.
actually aren't faults.
Mm.
They're just part of the many pieces that make him unique in who he is.
Mm.
And I think that's where that self-worth comes into play, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then stage 3 or phase 3, anger and projection, you said.
Yeah. Well, I'll stereotype here. Most men, we do anger pretty well. And,
Right.
and, right. But, you know, I see it work, you know, right. Men either are ragers and they're in it and you really know where they're at, or they hold it in and then it
Right.
comes out sideways. Right. And
Yes.
so the anger and the projection and actually, you know, I was sharing with you, when we were having our lunch, is that, you know, for me, my experience, I remember, I'm just going to admit some stuff here. I think it's kind of in the book, but like, man, in my mind, I was like coming up with strategies like, how do I get even with this guy that stole my wife, right? How can I hurt him? I don't mean physically, although I'm sure I had some of those
Sure.
thoughts, right?
Sure.
Full disclosure, right?
Yeah.
But like the anger consumed me, right? And I was projecting on him and I was making up stories. And what I learned in that is that anger didn't serve me.
Mm.
It kept me hidden. It kept me away from the work I really had to do. It allowed me to focus on the wrong thing. Actually, the anger needed to be at my ex-wife and myself and the breakdown of our relationship. For, you know,
Yeah.
I learned I wanted to be angry at myself because I missed some signs or I had a chance to grow and I didn't do it. Right. But it's lost energy for sure, I think.
Yeah.
And as we know, under anger is pretty much always sadness,
Right.
right? Grief and
Right.
the heartache. And so it's a delay mechanism.
Mm.
So, yeah, keeping you from your truth, if you will.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Right. So then it goes down into, and you mentioned this a little bit ago,
Yeah.
competitiveness and jealousy. Let's talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I'll tell you, I have some clients that they start to hit the gym. They start to diet, right? I had one guy that he was so excited. He came in and told me he bought a membership at a tanning salon. He was going to show his wife that he was worthy and good looking, right? And right. And I think that's human nature, right? I want to see
Right.
where I measure up, right? I think
Right.
we're all comparing ourselves to the Joneses, as they say. And so I see a lot of men doing that. It's like, and I think men by nature were more competitive, right? And so, I will tell you, I like when through my experience, I was figuring out like, who is this guy and what does he do and what are his hobbies and well, I do that too. And right, like it's that compare and contrast, which again keeps us stuck, doesn't help healing, right? It actually, I think it amplifies the hurt, or actually it keeps the hurt hidden, which allows it to grow and cultivate a lot more. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So good. Okay. Then next, because I've got my little cheat sheet here.
Yeah.
Withdrawal and
We're all
isolation.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say, don't we all do that sometimes
Yeah.
when we're in pain, right? Like just, I think after that shock goes away, all that anger, all those things, I think there's a phase of being numb. And also I think there's a phase of, what do I do? Maybe for a guy, it might be admitting defeat or realizing that they're powerless. That, I think for most men, I think for me, I learned like my wake up was when I surrendered. I work with men a lot on the idea of surrender because most men think surrender means I'm a quitter.
Right.
When actually I think surrender is actually, that's a man of strength. That's a man of clarity. That's a man that knows that what I'm doing isn't working and I need to ask for help. Right. And so I think that's the part, right? We withdraw, we isolate, kind of got to lick our wounds. I think the sadness kind of gets to really start to build. And then you start to realize I have to do something different. So I would say that would be, what's that, stage 5, right?
An interesting dynamic that I'm thinking of right now as I'm listening to you describe this particular phase or stage. Thinking back on when I have worked with male betrayed partners and their partners, I think a couple of them were kind of stuck in that phase of withdrawal and isolation. It's like they got there and then they sort of landed there. And so interesting, it was their wives. Some of them was like their wives bringing them in, like, come on, we've got to get help, like, and they had almost,
wake him.
I want to make this better. I want us to be okay, but they were just sort of still in that place.
You have to be willing to admit defeat, right? And that's part of it. I have some of my clients that come to me not for betrayal trauma. Like I have a couple guys like a year or two working with them, and they'll finally admit to me, I finally feel safe enough to tell you this happened to me. And I'm just like, wow, how have you done that? And they haven't very well, right? But it takes a lot, I've noticed, for a man to surrender.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, and in fact, I talked to one of the clients I worked with about this. He basically said, this is paraphrasing, but he said, what she's asking me to do by engaging this therapy now on our marriage, because he was of the mindset of like, okay, she says she's not going to do it anymore. Fine. I will never trust her the same, but fine, we'll stay married, but he didn't want to actually engage the work. And he said, she's asking me to do things now in therapy that I know I'm not good at, feelings and sharing and being vulnerable, when I'm already feeling like I must have not been good at being her husband either. So like piling on, these 100%. Insecurities. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember, and I was telling you, like I tended to be more of an avoidant, but not not a true love avoidant kind, but like if things got bad or difficult, I wouldn't want to jump in and do the messy work. I would be like, man, this works. We'll keep it like this. Right. So, and I see a lot of guys do that, but what they don't realize is, like you were saying, that vulnerability, learning how to communicate, learning how to just be open to listening to your partner.
Right.
That's actually like 101 for for not only marriage, just for any kind of relationship.
Right.
And I've never really heard of marriages or relationships having affairs if they were deeply connected, if they had great communication, right? If there's trust, and trust comes from those things, right? From the vulnerability and the talking and the understanding and the acceptance. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So after withdrawal and isolation, hopefully they get to that place of surrender, because it looks like there's a turn
Yes.
with
That's
stage 5 or 6 now.
what do they say? That's where the magic happens, right?
Okay.
That's the secret sauce, if you will. That's when the surrender happens. That's when the man can step into the rebuilding and the transformation.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing with guys that will tell me, like, I never realized I can be this way. I never realized I can listen to my wife. I never realized I can share my feelings. I never
Mm.
realized a relationship could be this way because I watched my parents never hug, never kiss, never talk, right? And so that's the magical spot. And that's the part where what I want everyone to know is, if your relationship gets, saved, reconciled, whatever, or if it ends, it doesn't matter. The rebuilding and transformation is not about that. It's about you, and it's your chance to change who you are. And it's not only for you and your relationship, but it's for the other people in your lives. I often tell guys that, I have this belief that if you start to live your life different, if you start to show up different, you can change like 7 generations moving forward.
Yeah.
Because if you have children, they will see you in another different light, right? And if you have sons, even more so. But even for your daughters, right, you'll be a safe man, a man that can communicate, and they're going to seek out a person like that too. So
Right.
wouldn't you want to do it for all of those reasons versus
Yeah.
just staying stubborn and not surrendering?
It's so good.
Yeah.
Which takes us right up to the last of the 7 stages: positive growth
Number
and
7.
resilience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the win.
Yeah.
Right? For the win.
That's right.
That's the final score that gets you where you want to go in life. Like, one thing I learned on my journey was that I can be authentic. I can be me. I hold boundaries now. I never really held a boundary in my lifetime until, after this experience and really learning what got me there, right? That was one of my mistakes, not holding boundaries with my partner, and not holding boundaries with myself too. You want to say
Okay, so
something? I can tell.
I did, so I made a note about boundaries, because that's a theme in your book. That's a recurring theme in your book.
Yeah, it's a big chapter in my book, but yeah, that's a
right.
big part.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that a little bit more. What
Okay.
when you got a guy sitting in front of you, you just started working with him, and you're like, you got to set boundaries, and he goes, what's a boundary?
What's
right?
a boundary?
What's a boundary? And what advice would you have for men struggling to set and enforce boundaries after betrayal?
The $1 million question. Well, the first thing I tell people is, a boundary is not a way where we punish the other person. Right? A boundary is something, for me, and what I teach is, a boundary is measurable. And a boundary is something that keeps me safe and or my partner safe as it pertains to our relationship.
Yeah.
I should write that down. That was pretty good.
That's good. That was good. Yeah. Yeah. This will be recorded.
Yeah, so,
you can pull it.
Oh, good. I can go back later. Okay. Yeah. So that's the first part I teach. What was your next? I forgot the other part you were asking me.
Just advice if someone's never really done this. I mean, let's be real. Very few people out there were actually taught what a boundary is and how to set a boundary when they were growing up, right? So that's what it is. What's the initial advice you would give to someone who's never really been intentional about setting boundaries, and specifically for men after betrayal?
And betrayal. Well, I think it's easier to give an example. Like, if I'm still in a relationship with a person that, let's say, is having an emotional affair with their best friend, right? Mm-hmm. I might say, so for me to feel safe, I need you to cut off that relationship right now as we go through this work together, not permanent. Or, I need you, I need to have permission maybe when I want to see your text messages, or I may have a boundary where I don't want you talking to this person for a certain amount of time till we navigate where we're at. If there's a physical affair, right, it would be cutting off contact completely with this individual, right? Not seeing them, not responding to them. Maybe it's even blocking them, right? So those are boundaries to make me feel safe. Those are boundaries to make our relationship feel safe. I've had clients where there's no boundaries, and and their partner's still acting out and they don't feel safe and nothing's moving in a good direction, right? You have to have that shift. You have to have those boundaries, or there's no recovery in that sense, right?
Right. Right.
So,
And then, so then what happens if their wife or partner says, no, I don't want you reading my text messages?
well, you have to decide, right? Like there's
Yeah.
things like they're deal breakers, right?
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
my ex told me that she did not, it was through her work. She didn't want to quit her job and she wasn't so sure that she wanted to end that relationship. And I had power, but I didn't know I had any power.
Mm.
And I was afraid of my truth and I was afraid of boundaries. And I'll tell you, I was so afraid I was so afraid to tell her, no, you can't do that. Because I was afraid if I did, she would leave me. And I have so many guys tell me, and I've heard women too, right? Like, if I give them a boundary and they don't like it, they'll leave me or they'll keep doing it. Well, maybe,
Yeah.
but haven't they already left you and aren't they still doing
Mm-hmm.
it? Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
boundaries help you find your power. Boundaries help you feel safe. Um, I'll never not go back to not doing boundaries in my life,
Right. Yeah. Once you start practicing them, and yeah, there's no going
Magical.
back. I want to camp on this
Yeah.
a little bit longer, because something you just
Sure.
said I think is so important. It's a theme that I can easily mount a soapbox on this, but I'll instead allow you to
No,
to
we'll
do that if you
soapbox it
want to.
together. No,
Maybe
together is good
so,
too.
but and I think this applies regardless of the gender of the betrayed partner. I heard you say you didn't recognize the power you had.
Yeah.
And I think that is so critical. I mean, one of the top things that I want a betrayed partner to understand is you have more power than any therapist or coach, right?
Yeah.
Or podcast or whatever. So let's unpack that. Say more about that power.
Poke around that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I think some people are afraid of their power
Yes.
and they don't know how to use their power. And when I was referring to power, I wasn't mean taking over, being dominant, right? Being a
Right.
tyrant king,
Right.
if you will. For me, my truth is my power.
Mm.
And if someone doesn't want to hear my truth, they don't have to agree with it. But if they don't want to respect it, if they don't want to honor my truth, then I don't know why maybe I'm in a relationship with that person,
Mm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think my ex wanted to hear my truth. She wanted to be in her truth, which I get, I respect. And that should have been red flag number 800 and something, right? By that point, right? So, um, the other part is I think we have to be in our truth to really know what we want, who we want. I think then it backs up to our self-worth and our self-esteem and our
Right.
self-love. And I'll tell you, when I was going through it, I did not love myself very much.
Mm.
Not at all. Like I was actually overweight and I was stuck in my life. And this just was another big old brick I had to carry in my satchel, right? And so I was open to punishing myself and not believing there could be another way. So yeah, power is super important.
Super important. I love the connection to the truth. I love how that backs into self-love, self-worth.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of resistance, I think, to owning power, because it can be scary. And if I have power, that means I have choices.
Yeah.
Going back to where this line of conversation started, if you set a boundary, hey, I want to be able to see your text messages. I want access to your devices. And they say no, ball's in my court.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the thing with some boundaries, especially non-negotiable, is are you true? I always tell, if you set this boundary, are you really willing to uphold the consequence?
Mm.
And I want to back up real quick because, the text message thing, that could be I do want to say that could be a slippery slope, right? As we both know in this
Sure.
business, because you don't want to start policing your partner and because
No.
the truth is, like, I remember, I can't remember if we probably didn't do that because I had no boundaries, but just thinking about it, I could see I would have had the urge to look every day and be spying. And then again, I'm focusing on the wrong thing. I'm not focusing on myself and my healing and my mental health and my growth. I'm focusing
Right.
on something actually I have no control over.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And like in the APSATS model, we teach that early on, I mean, it's very similar to your phases here, that initial shock that comes on, the first thing we need is safety and stability. And we find
Yeah.
those sorts of searching and seeking behaviors, they happen at first. It's a natural safety seeking thing, but long term, living your life that way is probably not going to lead to the sort of flourishing and health that we
Yeah.
want. Yeah.
I think living that way will create a deeper cloud, darker cloud over you. I think it creates more depression and depressive episodes. And I think it's harder to dig out of that hole for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you for letting us
My
talk
pleasure.
about power
Nice.
for a little longer.
Power and boundaries.
Yeah, it's huge. Let's talk more about sort of society. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of our conversation, but let's maybe name specifically some of the societal expectations around masculinity, right? That can come up and get in the way.
Yeah. Men don't cry.
Mm.
Right. Like we were said earlier, right? Men, we fix everything. Can't be weak.
Right.
Can't show emotions. Can't be flawed. Like I hear all those kind of stories a lot. But I think our society is the man doesn't cry and the man's not weak. I actually think crying, I think the bravest men I know are the men that cry.
Absolutely.
Right? Like those are the ones that are in touch with their hearts. Those are the ones that are making it safe for everyone else out there to be in their truth. And then the underlying part of that is men struggle often with their vulnerability, right? With being seen, with being emotional, again, being in their truth, right? I think if you're not vulnerable, I don't know how you're in your truth.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not, otherwise I think you're just pumping your chest and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think our traditional views of masculinity need to really start to change. They have been. I think there's so many movements in that way. There's so much out there now today around men being authentic and being in their true emotions. And I think that's beautiful. And that makes it safe for everyone. Right.
Yeah. You write about that in your book, that there's really an opportunity to redefine masculinity. For those who go through this. Let's talk about that. How can men who find themselves in this, situation no one would want to be in or wish on anyone, but how can they embrace this process in a way that they get to be a part of something, I think, larger of redefining masculinity?
Yeah. Back to me and my story, it woke me up. It shook me, right? Because what I thought meant to be a man, I quickly learned wasn't. And I was in a men's group, the Mankind Project. We'll give them a free plug if that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the first places that I learned that I can trust other men, that I can cry in front of another man, that another man can hug me and I can feel his love and his empathy and his support. And I don't know if in the rest of the world that happens that much because society has told us we can't do that. But I can tell you, like the saying of a brotherhood, that's one of the main things that saved me through my betrayal journey. Was I had my brotherhood through the Mankind Project and my men in my men's group, where I was able to be vulnerable, and even more so, I was witnessed.
Yes.
And they had pain from my pain.
Yeah.
And I think, like, imagine what the world might be like today if we had more of that for all of us, right? There's so much divide in the world, and that's a tangent, but that was part of for me, that's how I navigated the society and how we're told we're supposed to be. The other thing for men, right? It's finding someone like myself for you, a therapist or a betrayal trauma coach, someone that can help you navigate and understand how to get through these issues and problems. Or if you have a best friend, someone that you can truly be vulnerable for. But I would say the thing about that with friends when you're navigating betrayal is you want to have a boundary on their judgments, right? You don't want their judgments and their opinions, because often I find the friends are so biased, right? They'll be like, leave her, she's terrible, I never liked her, right? I hear that all the time. Then the guy's like, yeah, and I reconcile, and now my best friend who told me she's terrible, right? And I'm like, hey, Bob, it's like, it's awkward, right?
Yeah.
You just want someone that can witness you, support you, love you, hear you, right? And I think those are the things we can navigate. Finding books that speak to you, stuff like that.
Yeah. And so I'm sure you get guys reaching out to you about this. People, where can men find, these sorts of support networks? Where would you point people now, or how could they build one to help them on this journey?
That's a good question. And I mean, there's some men's groups out there. I'm not going to plug them. You can look them up, right? You also have to be aware, right? Some are religious based, which is fine. You need to know what you're stepping into.
Right.
I think support, right? If you find a group that you relate to, that you feel safe in, right? So I think you can find those groups out there. And I know some therapists and betrayal coaches they create groups. So I'm actually setting one up. I'll plug myself. January 15th, I'm planning on starting it. I got to get enough guys to sign up. I just started putting it out there. But those kind of places I think are safe and where you can find the support you need.
Excellent. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. How about rebirth? What does it look like on the other side when you get to the healing side? Love to hear about that, both your own experience and what you've seen with your clients.
Rebirths, of course, it's different for everyone. Like through my process, that's when I was like, I'm going to be a therapist, right? It kind of shook me, and always wanted to be a therapist. So, the rebirth is, I have a handful of guys that they're questioning their career choices and what they're doing in life. I have some that are just starting to date again, and they realize what they want and need and are willing to accept is so different in a partner, right? And those, and the key word is partner. And so those are the things that happen in that regrowth. And the other part is like the resilience, right? Is there was a part of me, like, I never thought I would want to, I thought I'd want to date again, but I never thought I would want to get married again. A lot of my friends never thought I did. And I did get remarried to an amazing, beautiful woman. And I had to do the work, and I had to find the right partner who actually understood, and in my case, actually had some similar-ish wounds, right? And so that even made it easier, better, and safer, if you will. So the resilience part's the part where you get to live your life again. And I'd even say some of that PTSD, you don't lead with it anymore. It's there, it's there. Maybe it's part of your bumper, the bumpers, the rail, the guardrails, but it doesn't control everything anymore, for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I hear you describing that post-traumatic growth of the, the transformation, the realignment of values, even growth in sense of identity. And, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I had a client, actually it was just a couple months ago. He was laughing. He was saying, my ex, too bad, because she's not getting this amazing version of myself. He was so proud of who he'd become. And he's dating someone seriously, and he's like, she's so lucky and I'm so lucky, and my ex, she doesn't have any idea, right? But he also realizes if that didn't happen, he would never have had what I actually want guys to reframe to as an amazing, life-changing experience. Like I tell people my betrayal journey was the worst time of my life, and it ended up being the best time of my life.
Wow.
You can have both of those, for sure.
Wow. You know what, Adam? I think that is a perfect final word of encouragement to folks.
Good.
Hey, say a little more about where people can find you and the work you're doing if they're interested in getting in touch with you, working with you.
Yeah. So my new website is betrayalshrink.com. And my book comes out January 1st. It'll be available on Amazon, of course. And the book's called A Man's Guide to Partner Betrayal. And as we were talking earlier, it's probably the only book out there for men written by a man going through partner betrayal. So, yeah.
Fantastic. That is awesome. Well, I am just so excited to have such a great resource now to point these men to, because it's needed.
Thanks.
It's needed.
Appreciate that.
I'm sure we will have you back and talk again. Adam, I appreciate your time. Thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Betrayal Recovery Radio, hosted by Dr. Jake Porter. If you value the content we've shared today, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. For more resources, visit APSATS.org. That's APSATS.org.